Stephen Grover Cleveland was born on March 18, 1837, just as Andrew Jackson had left the White House and Martin Van Buren took his place. Grover always preferred to be called by his middle name. Grover was the fifth of 9 children, and he was born in the small town of Caldwell in the state of New Jersey. This time, more modern things were being created, and this was a time of change, and for a while, his small birth town had not been introduced to much of it. For now, a simple small town. With all the many kids Grover's parents had to take care of, his parents were quite strict and expected all the kids to act like young adults. His parents were busy people, and his dad worked for his church and worked for it almost until the day he died. But due to this, Grover gained much self-reliance in his childhood, and it stayed with him his whole life, although he still had fun in his childhood. At a very young age, Grover was introduced to fishing, and he quite enjoyed it, and his love for fishing lasted his whole life. Grover would later say that his early years of childhood in Caldwell were the best in his life. At the age of 14, Grover's dad's health began to get bad, and they moved to Clinton, New York, for one of his dad's new posts. Grover was deeply saddened by the move and wrote letters to his friends afterwards. At age 17, Grover was hoping he'd be able to go to Hamilton College, where one of his brothers was just about to graduate. But things weren't so well for the Cleveland family with all the kids and his father's health, so instead, Grover had to become a store clerk. Grover began thinking that now was the time to apply for Hamilton, but once again things intervened. His father died, and he died only soon after taking another position in his church. This crushed Grover's dream of ever going to law school. Instead, one of Grover's brothers got a job at the New York Institution for the Blind, and he quickly moved up in jobs there until he'd become principal. He then made Grover his assistant, but Grover quickly realized he did not want to be there long. A relative who was also a neighbor admired Grover and loaned him some money.
I just can't work at the institution for the blind anymore. I want to go to law school and get a real career.
I understand. Go. Listen, I'm gonna loan you some money. You can go wherever you want, and you get a job in education. Sound good? I know that you can go far.
He stopped to visit his wealthy uncle, who also loved Grover, and he owned a ranch, and he was well connected in the town of Buffalo, New York.
So, I have had a hard time trying to get into college to study law, so I thought that I would just stop by and stay for a few days.
Law, you say? Well, this town is all about that. I live alone, but I'm connected with the people. Do you want to live with me?
Really?
Yes, I'll pay for your education, and you can do whatever you want with the money. And you can go wherever your education in law takes you.
This was perhaps the most important milestone in the life of Grover Cleveland. If it wasn't for what was supposed to be a short stop, Grover may have never even gone to law school or even go as far as he ended up going in politics. Sadly, at about this time, the Civil War was about to start. Grover never had any intentions of fighting in the Civil War, but he had 2 younger brothers who fought and died fighting for the Union. Later it seems that if Grover had fought in the war and survived, he would have looked like a better politic, because many of his politic rivals later fought in the Civil War. Grover went to law school in Buffalo as expected, and as soon as he had passed the bar, he became a lawyer. He was such a hard worker and would quite often stay up late at night and work at his desk. Sadly, he also became a heavy drinker. Buffalo was considered a boomtown for a little while because many immigrants came to Buffalo. Many of them were Irish immigrants who loved their beer, and so there were many taverns there. People would joke that there was one on every corner of Buffalo. So usually after a hard week, Grover would go and drink. Grover became known for his hard work, and he became a popular attorney. Due to this, C.C. Torrance, the current district attorney of Erie County, made Grover his assistant. Grover, of course, took it very seriously and got much completed. This benefited Torrance. Grover continued to grow in popularity. He was nominated for House of Representatives. He came so close but lost. This loss didn't faze him at all, probably because it was his first time running for something, and he did very well on his first try. Later, he decided he would run for sheriff. This would quite suit Grover because he was obviously very fond of law. Grover won the election and became sheriff, his first political victory. Not long after that, Grover ran for and became the mayor of Buffalo in 1882. This was a great victory for now Mayor Cleveland. Surprisingly, Grover Cleveland became governor of New York in the December of 1882, and because of this, he had to resign as mayor to become governor. Not long after becoming governor, there was talk about Governor Cleveland being nominated for president, but until then, Grover had much work to do as governor. What do you think about this, Governor?
I don't know. Let me ask Lamont. Lamont?
Yes, Governor?
Governor Cleveland was a busy man and he had many decisions to make, and his good friend and assistant Lamont was his go-to guy, and Lamont was nicknamed Ask Lamont because Governor Cleveland would always run an idea through Lamont before making any final decisions. As Cleveland was governor, he made many speeches and became known for having boring speeches. He was always formal and unsmiling, but his speeches got to the point and got things done.
And that concludes my speech.
Also, he was quickly nicknamed Veto Governor, and for good reason. As governor, he had vetoed 8 ideas to be canceled, but it was usually with good reason. Several times Congress was planning on doing something very expensive and without benefit, and Grover didn't allow this. Governor Cleveland was nominated for president and won by a landslide. On March 4th, 1885, Governor Cleveland became president. So on March 2nd, President Cleveland got on a special train to take him to the White House, with his go-to guy, Lamont, of course. Lamont would continue to help Cleveland and would always refer to him as Governor Cleveland, even when Cleveland is president. Once again, Cleveland was busy, working many hours a day. Cleveland was always shy with women and obviously loved food. One time, when Cleveland was being served his lunch at the White House, he was given his meal, but when he saw what was being brought to the servants, he really preferred the dish being given to the servants, and so he said to the chef, "Well, William, take this down to the servants and bring theirs to me." On Decoration Day, President Cleveland made the mistake of going fishing, and this angered the Civil War veterans, and Cleveland always loved fishing, so he did it in whatever spare time he had. Cleveland was always shy with women, but he managed to get married anyway. The press was a huge nuisance to him, and he could do nothing to stop them from always asking him things about his personal life. Grover Cleveland got married to Frank Folsom, but she changed her last name to Cleveland, of course, and she always preferred to be called Frances. Cleveland was a little embarrassed about this, though, because his wife was almost 27 years younger than him. Marriage certainly helped his loneliness of working long hours alone, and his wife decorated the White House a little bit and even got a couple dogs. Soon enough, Cleveland's first term was over. He wasn't nominated for a second term, but he ran for president again anyway. He lost to Benjamin Harrison, who had a great-grandfather who knew Benjamin Franklin and was also related to William Henry Harrison, a past president.
Now, keep the house nice and tidy because we'll be back in the White House 4 years from now.
Grover obviously planned on running for president again because of that. The Clevelands went house hunting for a little while afterwards, moving a couple of times until finally deciding to stay at a little cottage in Cape Cod, Massachusetts in 1891. Also, Cleveland began going around giving companies advice and making many speeches. When the time came, Grover did run for president, hoping to have a second term. He succeeded because on November 8, 1892, Grover was re-elected for president. A very tense moment in Grover's life was only 2 months after being re-elected. President Cleveland had cancer in his mouth due to him chewing tobacco. To hide this, a secret surgery was done on the president, and luckily it went well. Although one of the doctors let the cat out of the bag in 1917 when he was interviewed by a newspaper and talked about the president's surgery. After his last successful term, the Clevelands had the McKinleys over for dinner because William McKinley was just about to become president, and they were friends of the Clevelands. For the rest of his life, he wrote articles for all sorts of things, and Grover's first child died in 1904. Until then, the Clevelands had 5 children, and when they had their first child, Grover wrote to a friend and told him that he felt that life had finally started. When their first child died at age 13 of diphtheria, a candy bar company named their new chocolate bar after her. Baby Ruth. In 1907, Grover Cleveland died of a heart attack. His health had been failing for a long time, and he finally died with Frances at his bedside of that heart attack. It is said that his last words were, "I've tried so hard to do what is right."